Samuel's story. Why is it being forgotten? Meet the Pizars. Samuel's parents, David and Helena, along with their two children, lived in Białystok, Poland, where in the 1930s, Jews made up half of the city's population. They were a middle-class Jewish family. David had founded the city's first taxi cab company. Samuel was 10 years old and his sister Freda was 8 when first Germany and then the USSR invaded Poland. They were forced into a ghetto. 2 years later, Samuel's father was taken away one morning and shot and killed. When Samuel was 13, along with Freda and Helena, they were sent to Majdanek extermination camp. His mother and his sister were murdered upon their arrival. Samuel's 3 years in captivity took him to the death camps of Auschwitz, Sachsenhausen, Oranienburg, Dachau, and finally to the slave labor complex of the Engelberg Tunnel. After escaping, Samuel and two friends hid in a barn. In his 1980 memoir of Blood and Hope, Samuel recounts his rescue with these words. The tank resumed its advance, lumbering cautiously towards me. I looked for the hateful swastika, but there wasn't one. Instead, I made out an unfamiliar emblem. It was the 5-pointed white star. I was in front of the tank, waving my arms. The hatch opened. A big black man climbed out, swearing unintelligibly at me. I fell at the black man's feet. I threw my arms around his legs and I yelled at the top of my lungs, "God bless America!" Samuel learned that of the 900 Jewish students in his school, he was the only one to survive the Holocaust. His uncle invited him to Australia, where he resumed his education and he tried to adapt to the norms of society. With a caring family and the protections of democracy and order, Samuel discovered that not only could he survive, but also that he was a gifted student. Samuel earned a PhD at the Sorbonne and another in law at Harvard, where he met other gifted refugee boys, among them Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski. After a time in government, Pizar began his work as an international lawyer in Paris and then on to New York. His first book, Coexistence and Commerce, was hailed as brilliant. Having lived under the Soviet rule and been less than impressed, Samuel saw commerce as the key to coexistence between the superpowers. He also despaired over the burgeoning arms race, calling it madness. He lived a life of achievement and honor in law, in government, and the arts. Samuel Pizar became a world-class lawyer with clients like Coca-Cola, the Republic of China, not to mention Elizabeth Taylor. He was an advisor to several presidents, and he was the creator of the text for Leonard Bernstein's symphony known as Kaddish. Pizar devoted himself to sharing his survival story with the world. He established the Pizar Holocaust Studies program at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. In 1971, Pizar married art advocate Judith Frem. Meet Tony. Upon marrying Judith, Samuel adopted her son Tony from a previous marriage. Tony was the same age that Samuel had been when Poland was invaded, and Samuel's nightmare had begun. Pizar raised Tony in a home that was a gathering place of artists, musicians, presidents and prime ministers, philosophers and writers from the East and the West. Tony grew up watching his stepfather attempt to reconcile the Cold War conflict between the U.S. and the USSR. Above all, Samuel taught his stepson about the nature of evil. He learned firsthand about human cruelty and the dangers of authoritarianism. Tony was taught what it was to be enslaved, to yearn for freedom, to never take freedom for granted, and to cherish its blessings. In 2013, Tony heard his stepfather utter the following message while he spoke at Auschwitz. "I came here to see for myself the evil humans can do to humans, and say that those who deny the genocide of Auschwitz are committing genocide themselves." Samuel Pisar died in 2015, believing that the State of Israel is the best protection against any recurrence of the Holocaust. The story continues. In 2021, Samuel's stepson, Antony Blinken, was tapped by President-elect Joe Biden to serve as his Secretary of State. During his Senate confirmation hearing, Blinken invoked the memory of his stepfather. He said the following: "My late stepfather, Samuel Pisar, found refuge in America after enduring the horrors of the Holocaust. At the end of the war, he made a break from a death march into the Bavarian woods, and from his hideout he heard the rumbling sound of a tank. And as he looked out, instead of seeing the dreaded Iron Cross, he saw a 5-pointed white star. He fell to his knees and he said the only 3 words that he knew in the English language that his mother had taught him before the war: God bless America. The GI lifted him into the tank, into freedom, into America. That's who we are. That's what we represent to the world, however imperfectly, and what we can still be when we're at our best. If I have the honor of serving as Secretary of State, that is the vision that I will pursue." Let's look for a moment at what is known as the Palestinian problem. This man is Mahmoud Abbas. He's also known as Abu Mazen. He is the 85-year-old leader of the Palestinian Authority. In 2018, he publicly stated that the Nazi mass murder of European Jews was the result of the Jews' financial activities, not the result of anti-Semitism. In 1982, he had authored The Connection Between the Nazis and the Leaders of the Zionist Movement 1933-45 at the People's Friendship University of Russia. It was published as a book in Arabic titled The Other Side, The Secret Relationship Between Nazism and Zionism. He is the prime example of what Pisar labeled those who would deny the genocide. He is also the prime advocate for the PA's Pay for Slay program that offers huge cash incentives for Arab terrorists who attack and murder Jews. Why do we mention him? Because, apparently, Blinken backs Abbas. On May 25, 2021, in a move strongly supportive of Abbas and the PA, Secretary of State Blinken announced his support for the reopening of the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem. The consulate was merged into the U.S. Embassy when the embassy was moved to Jerusalem in 2018 by the Trump administration. Well, what does this move mean? It means strong U.S. support for Abbas. According to the protocols of diplomacy, international diplomacy, only embassies are placed into capital cities. Consulates are placed into non-capital cities. By placing a U.S. consulate in Jerusalem, the U.S. is announcing to the world that it no longer recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Such a move strongly endorses the standing of Holocaust denier Abbas and is devastating to our nation's closest ally, the State of Israel. So here is the big question. How is it possible that the head of our nation's foreign policy, a person who was taught the lessons of the Holocaust from childhood by his illustrious survivor stepfather, and who now, in his passion to embrace the administration's flawed policy of undoing and rejecting all things Trumpian, how is it that he has utterly forgotten the true meaning of Samuel's story? If you have an answer to this question, kindly post it in the comments section or write to me at peter peterweisz.com. Thank you.